Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Just kind of as a follow-up from yesterday's video, this is the actual footage that I had for the animation video thing that I wanted to do for Live2D. So this is what I initially had planned. I did not lose the footage of me doing the sketching process for the thumbnailing. So I'm going to show you guys little snippets just because I don't want to show the entire footage, and this way it's a little bit more digestible. Also, if you haven't watched yesterday's video, I highly recommend you watch it. It's not exactly the same thing as today's video, so yeah, please check it before I update the thumbnail and stuff to be a little bit more reflective to what it actually is. But today, we are going to be doing animation in Live2D, and Live2D is kind of the program I use to do also the rigging for my VTuber model, and it's many I guess like other artists go to for rigging for VTuber models, but also I've seen people use it for like small snippets for animation and all that like kind of stuff that requires you to need to basically rig, but taking advantage of the rigging and parameters that Live2D has and being able to use those for keyframes for an animation. So I've seen people use it for also emotes for Twitch, alongside with just like small little animations of like blinking eyes and all that jazz. So for the thumbnailing, I did do 4 thumbnails, so I kind of went back and forth thinking that maybe I would do one of Akemi, who's my other OC, who I don't draw like as much, but then ultimately I went with Masaki because usually when I tackle something that I'm not used to, starting off with a familiar character usually kind of dumbs down the process a little bit for me, so I don't have to think about too much about the character's design as much as I would need to if I wanted to draw someone who I wasn't exactly used to. So maybe in the future, I'll try something a little bit more ambitious for Akemi because I do have a bit of an idea of what I wanted to do, and I kind of want to do something with the last thumbnail with Akemi for that one. But for today, we are going to be focusing on the third one, which is Masaki holding a potted plant. And I'm writing down some notes here alongside with my thumbnails. And the flower shop setting that I had for Masaki, I'm actually gonna forego that. I'm going to just do a simple background because I want to play around with the window silhouette alongside with leaves. So yeah, that is what we have for the thumbnails. I'll show you guys a quick close-up on the bottom right-hand corner because I forgot to show the bigger version. But in Clip Studio Paint, I have 2 windows open of the same canvas. So I have an overview and then the actual canvas that I'm drawing on. And then for the smaller window, I guess that's kind of the tan, I have my thumbnail just like placed there so I don't get too lost of what I wanted to do initially. So right off the bat, I did not take in consideration how long formatted a lot of the Tears of Themis cards actually look. So I didn't really explain this. In Tears of Themis, they actually have a bunch of cards. Usually I think it's SR cards and the SSR cards have a lot of movement to the actual cards that you can get in the game. So if you're interested, please check out the game and you can check out the different animations that they have for the cards. A lot of them have like very simple movement, some of them have like moving backgrounds. Usually there's sound as well, like a little bit of ambiance, maybe like birds chirping, wind, waves crashing, something that fits the card's atmosphere. But like small things like the hand moving, eyes moving, opening, or like eyes opening, mouth opening, usually hair flowing, the eyes kind of going back and forth, like looking from left to right or up and down, anything like that. Sometimes like the head angle moves just like a little bit, but it seems like the whole card feels like it's kind of like breathing because there's so much movement, but the movement's still very subtle. So I wanted to do that in Live2D, and because I was trying to keep the format very similar to the Tears of Themis cards, I decided to go with their kind of proportions, but I decided to use the proportion that my phone could handle. So I did take a picture or like a screenshot of a card in Tears of Themis, which was the Artem that you saw at the very beginning, and that one did not have any movement because it wasn't necessary. So I didn't take in consideration how long the canvas would be. Therefore, when I started to do the sketch, I decided to include a lot more of Masaki's body rather than just leaving it as like a bust up of Masaki holding the potted plant like I did in my thumbnail. So moving on to the actual coloring portion and separating of the different elements. So similar to how I rig or set up my rigs for Live2D or just like VTuber models, I am trying to section out certain parts. I did dumb it down quite a bit, and kind of like with hindsight, I could have dumbed it down a lot more. Because a lot of these stuff I didn't really need to separate into their separate parts. So you can see right off the bat for the hair, I'm separating different colors for different chunks of the hair so I could have each individual piece kind of be able to move on its own. And the reason why I don't think I needed to do this, I think it would be easier if I did the base of Masaki's hair first. Kind of like almost as a round egg shape, but with like his hair volume intact, but then do like maybe parts of his bangs and then the bottom part of his hair and any little wispy parts I would do as individual strands later. And it would have been easier for me to plan, because when I started to section off his hair, I forgot to section them in a way that made sense with his scalp. So when I actually went to rig it, it was a lot more difficult without trying to expose his underside of his head, I guess. But every like different colored line is basically a different element that I want to be separate. Now, if you saw Saturday's video, which was the one of Hansuke, who is my cat OC mascot, for him, because he was the second attempt, I actually did Masaki before doing Hansuke. So Hansuke had a lot more of the dumbed down version of what I knew I wanted to have. Plus, like, his design's a lot easier. He's very round and very simple shapes. But even my setup for my Clip Studio Paint was very different. So on my left side of the whole screen, you can see all my layers, and you can see how many layers I have and how many times I'm going back and forth hiding and unhiding layers so that I can figure out which ones are line work and which one are color. So a way to combat that, and you'll probably see it later, is that I'm going to change a lot of my line work layers to have a red indicator on the side so that I know that they're line work and they're not color, or they're not just blank random layers. So just for like organization's sake, that's something I could probably use more to help with the, I guess, like organization of everything, so I can streamline the process a little bit more. Another thing I was trying to figure out if I could do is add a shadow at the very end. So you can see that I was playing around with like a multiply layer on top of his face and his eyes. And later on, I'm actually gonna not put the shadow in, even though Masaki probably needed it in order to fit into the environment that I have. But I didn't realize I would have to put probably multiply layer individually onto each section for it to make sense. And for Hansuke's version, I did it just simply by putting him all into shadow and then just carving out the highlight for each individual part. But because he's so simple and so round, it was much easier for me to do that. But for Masaki's sake, I decided that maybe it'll be a little bit too busy and a little bit hard to manage with the amount of parts that I had going on for the actual rigging portion. So, in the Hansuke video, I also mentioned that for Masaki's body, I kind of wish I separated his apron from the base of his sweater a little bit so that I could have it flow alongside with the other elements. Because like I said, the cards feel like they're almost like breathing in a way, because they're very, like, I feel like a lot of elements in the cards are moving, but they move so softly and so gracefully that it feels like everything's moving in unison, almost like as if a person was breathing. And I do think that adding more movement to his clothes would have helped a little bit with the other pieces that are moving, because I have his hair moving quite a bit. I also have his arm moving and the flowers moving, and then I'm going to have a bit of the background and some foreground elements coming in as well, which is very similar to Hansuke's. So if you watch Saturday's video, you would know that Hansuke's was actually referenced based off of the Masaki piece that I'm doing today. But I kind of wanted to do that so that if I did talk about the background a little bit, there's like hinting that the Hansuke piece could be the one I was talking about, even though I kept referring to Hansuke as like Masaki. So yeah, apologies for the confusion for people who did not watch until the very end, where I revealed that it was for April Fools. But you know, it was just for fun for a little bit, and I was kind of strapped on time for working on this because I had to move a different video for next week anyways. So yeah, I did kind of Hansuke, just did I think 2-3 hours. I think it's 2-ish hours for Hansuke. Masaki took me way too long. I think I spent 6 hours trying to do this for about a 6-7 seconds animation, which doesn't feel like it's worth it. But I do think if I can streamline the process and streamline the different ways that I can make each individual part before the raking portion, then I think it would work out a lot better. Another thing that I made a mistake is that I didn't go through my entire amount of layers and figured out which ones I needed to merge properly. So I actually had to redo the model twice because I wasn't able to move certain objects properly, because sometimes I had a multiply layer that wasn't merged properly, or I had the line work separate from the colors and I wanted them to be together. Otherwise, it just makes rigging more of a headache. Yeah, but oh, here's like what I was talking about. So on my left side of the screen, you can see that in Clip Studio Paint, there's like a little square right next to where it says normal on the left side, and you can actually set different layers to have different like color indicators. So like I said, I went ahead and did all the line work with the color red, and technically I could have made a mental note that every other layer was going to be the line work layer and every other layer was going to be the color layer, but just for ease of access, it was just for like easier for me visually to go through the layers and make sure that I was only selecting the layer underneath the red layer. Then I knew that was the actual coloring portion, and then once I'm done, I can merge the red layer and the color layer together so that I have one piece, which would be, I guess, the hair at this point, because I only did it for the hair because I was dumb and learned about this way too late. But yeah, also this is the part what I was talking about. I didn't separate his hair correctly, which is why there's a harsh shadow between the left side of his head and the right side of his head, because I really didn't want to go back and section off the hair properly, because I spent way too long just trying to figure out how I wanted to separate each individual piece for Masaki in general. I feel like when I was working on my VTuber model as long with my friend's VTuber model, I don't think I spent as long on the drawing process, and both of those ones were full bodies, and Masaki here is only like a, I don't know, a thigh up version of him, and this one felt a lot longer just because I did not separate the parts very well in terms of making it make sense in my brain. So yeah, if you're just work smarter, not harder, because definitely this one I worked way too long for something that probably didn't need to be as difficult as it was. Yeah, I think in terms of, now that I think about it, I might have to recheck that. I'm just noticing now, I did do a shadow underneath the hair, and it's like right onto Masaki's skin, and I don't remember if I actually added keyframes for that, which might be, we'll see what happens at the end. Maybe I'll make a comment about it or something. But yeah, last thing I wanted to do was to do the plants. So I have individual plants right here, and kind of all collaged together makes a little potted plant full of what looks similar-ish to peonies, similar to Hansuke's. I was just remembering from my brain what peonies somewhat kind of look like, and even though these are very stylized, hopefully it looks somewhat like a flower. And yeah, I just wanted to add some other kind of flowers here and there just to fill up the pot, but also because I wanted those elements to actually kind of move on their own alongside with Masaki. So I'm adding some other layers on top to adjust the lighting, but as you can see, when I imported them, I was having a bit of an issue. I also have to change the leaves in the back to become like additive layers so that they can retain their actual right properties. So we are in Live2D, and I did not go through the entirety of doing, or just showing you guys how I set my deformers and all my like warp deformers, rotation deformers, and all that jazz. I decided to do that off screen because it took me way too long, and I did not remember the order that I usually do, just to make things a little bit easier. So just to kind of ease my way into rigging again, I decided to pick some things that have more organic shapes, and I started to really crunch these leaves. So my plan was that for the keyframes, I wanted to have the leaves just pass through Masaki, like pass over him very slowly and kind of just like in a light breeze. And I thought that would just help with a bit of the movement and make the whole drawing a little bit more interesting. But after that, I went ahead and started to do a little bit more intricate rigging, which still turned out pretty poorly. I think I need to relook at my footage of when I was rigging my old model and see how I did that, because I feel like because I haven't rigged anything in several months, like it's almost been a whole year since I've done rigging, that I don't remember how to rig. So I was relying a lot on this curving line thing to help do the motion for each individual parameter, because even when I was moving the mouth, I'm like, it seems more difficult than usual. But yeah, I did open up my friend's model so that I could see how I did some of the movement. So for the parameters, so in the left side of the canvas of where I'm working, or my workspace, there's like these little yellow folders or little yellow bands. So it says like brows, mouth, body, background, and hair. I deleted some of the parameters because unlike some VTuber models and stuff, I don't need everything to be rigged in the same way. So I don't need to do like eyebrows doing different expressions technically for what I wanted to do for the animation. So I decided to just do a brow going up and down. Oh, it looks like I probably cut out quite a bit of the rigging, but once we get the rigging done, we can go into the animation mode. So you can just import your model into the animation. You can click to make a new scene, and then you can drag to make your actual timeline. And this is where you can play around with the parameters that you set. And every time you click on the parameter, whenever it's like on a certain time, you can set a keyframe for that particular object. So you can see there's like basically all the folders that had my parameters are now on the middle screen next to the timeline for the animation. And you can see I'm going through each individual kind of parameter and like setting different keyframes. So you can see I was setting up like Masaki's eye movements, I was doing the leaves, and another problem that I ran into is that when I was rigging the eyes, I did the order of rigging probably incorrectly because Masaki opening and closing his eyes was not aligned with the eyeballs moving. So whenever he moves his eyes to the left or the right, and I want him to close his eyes will immediately shift back to the center. So I did the rigging incorrectly, and that kind of screwed up what I wanted to do for the actual animation. Now, before I knew that you can actually just go ahead and set back your parameters and change your parameters, save it again, and open up your animation. It should be back to normal, or not back to normal, it should be updated, because that's what I did for Hansuke's tail, because Hansuke's tail looked very janky in the beginning, and then I reset it to be a little bit more smooth, and I used the rotation deformer so that his tail just swivels back and forth rather than me deforming it so it looks like it's curving. Yeah, I think that would have been a better option so that I could fix Masaki's eyes, because he doesn't really look to the left or the right anymore. He kind of looks to the right very briefly before immediately looking back into the center, which looks a little bit funky, but if you don't think about it too much, it doesn't look too bad because his eyes actually match up where the leaves kind of come in, so it looks like he's looking at the leaves as they pass through. And I slowed down the footage for you guys so that you guys can see in real time what the keyframes look like when I'm passing through them and making some small adjustments here and there. Because once you set a keyframe, you can always slide them back and forth so you can get the timing just right. Yeah, but I think the animation in total was about like 5 to 7 seconds, somewhere in between there. And for the most part, I do want to learn a little bit more how to do this a little bit more efficiently so I can make some small animations, because I usually do frame by frame animations and they're very janky and very like tiny and small, but I think this gives me a lot more option for getting a little bit of smooth movements and stuff. And because the parameters allow you to have transitions like this, it makes it a lot easier, because as long as you do the parameters correctly, you get a lot of variety and range for the keyframes, so you don't have to set each individual frame from like transitioning from one to another. It kind of knows what to do based on your parameter. So here's the still image of Masaki. So this is without the animation, and here's with the animation. Hope you guys liked today's video. Apologies for yesterday's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!